Hey guys, and how's it going? I figured I'd make a video today, and the subject is how to get the most power for your dollar on your VW engine. And of course, let's not affect gas mileage. Let's try and keep that down. A lot of people think if you do performance modifications, you ruin your gas mileage. That's absolutely not true. And with this, I'm going to tell you a little story. But first, I'm going to tell you, we're going to talk about anything from budget builds like 1600s to modify them, what to do for that, on up to 2-liter engines. Now again, I'm not going to get into the big 2 liters, you know, the 2332, 2387, 2276. No, we're not going to talk about those because those are big engines, and that's for really for high performance. So we're not going to get into that. But a small 2-liter, yeah, we're going to talk about that a little bit. And all of these options are reliable. So let me tell you a very old story about a guy named Bud. He used to work at our shop. He was an old guy, retired, and had nothing to do. So he was like, he's just come by the shop, and of course he got paid and everything, but he wanted to do something just because he wanted to get out of the house. So he worked at the shop. He did all kinds of things like, and of course he's passed away a long time ago, and it was really sad when he died. We were all kind of broken up over it. But what he used to do, Bud used to do, I'll tell you real quick, he used to do things like, he would set up all, you'd measure the case, he'd go get all the bearings, he'd lay out all the rods, brand new, because we use brand new rebuilt rods on everything, and he'd lay everything out on the table, all organized, the bolts, everything, so that you could just do your job and get it done quickly for the engine builder. He ran parts and all kinds of stuff like that. And he had a beautiful 1966 Beetle, and it was what was that, the VW, it was the VW red, or it was the red one, or ruby red, one of those two. I think it was ruby red. And it was a really clean car. He kept it just immaculate, and it was original. It was repainted, but it was just maintained. You know, everything was perfectly maintained on it. But he had a 2-liter engine in it. I don't know how it transpired, but he ended up putting a 2-liter in that thing with dual carbs, and it was just the biggest sleeper ever. 80-year-old guy driving a 2-liter Beetle, man, it was something else. Full of wisdom he was, really just so full of wisdom. He just had so many good insights on things. But anyway, let's get into it. What he did is he had this 2-liter, and he liked to go on road trips, so he'd go to Vegas and stuff like that a lot. And, you know, that was just a little fun thing to do. So he put cruise control on it. Now, back in years ago, they used to have these little cruise control sets, and they still have them around. I think they're Rostra, I think, if I remember right. The cruise control, and he put the he and the mechanic at the shop put the cruise control on his Beetle. So he'd drive it out to Vegas and stuff like that, and with the cruise control, and, you know, it was great. Just, you know, hands off the wheel. It worked everything. The brake, you know, you touch the brake and it turned off and all that stuff, and just drive down the road cruising 60, 65. Now, if I remember right, and I don't know if I do, I'm pretty sure it was a 76 motor. Kind of like this one right here. I think it was a 2021, because we didn't build very many really big engines back then to, you know, to machine out the case and everything. This one here can be done, the 2021 can be done without really using any kind of machine work on the case. I just clearanced around the rods just like you do a 74, and it went right together. Back at that time, there was not a lot of rod options like there are now, so I'm not sure what it had for rods in it. I'm pretty sure he had Carrillos, because that's really what we had, and they were really expensive. And he probably just saved up for months and months for those. I don't remember all that. But I don't think we would have put the ground down VW rods in his engine. I don't think so. Not Bud's. I didn't build it. It was another guy at the shop. It was just, I'm just saying, our shop wouldn't have done that. So anyway, he used to go on road trips. In fact, he went on a really long road trip in the car. And he set it up with a 2-liter engine with dual carbs. He had 40s, I believe, on it back then. You know, the old real 40 Webers. And he got, George says it was 40 miles a gallon, but I don't think so. I think it was 36 miles a gallon, if I remember right. 36 miles to the gallon in a Beetle with a 2-liter with dual carbs. Now, of course, he didn't drive very fast. He drove between 60 and 65. And, of course, he'd probably do 70 sometimes, but most of the time between 60 and 65. He went on a really long road trip. He went all over the United States or something crazy like that. I remember it was really long, and he came back, and he goes, yeah, I got 36 miles a gallon. But again, he had stock-sized tires. He upgraded the transmission to 3.88 gears, 388 gears, and he had the Bug 89 fourth in it. So it did not rev a very high RPM going down the road. So this is how you do this, you guys. If guys are like, oh wow, you know, you lose your gas mileage. No, you don't. If you keep the proper tire size on your car and you go with a taller gear set, you can really get good gas mileage in these things and have a 2-liter engine. So if all you've got is the money to do a 1600 and you don't, and let's say you're going to do a ring and bearing rebuild, you're going to run through it. Well, hopefully you'll do a better job of replacing the rings and everything else like we did not do on this. We just assembled it. It was supposed to be just a spare engine. But the one that came out of the blue car, if any of you guys watched the videos on that. This was a 1600 single port. Now, if you only have single port heads, that's fine. The same modification can be done with dual port, and it will give you a lot more horsepower and better drivability. Bud's engine could have been a 74 too. We did 78.4. We did those too because they were not that hard. The Chevy rods, that was a real common combination back in the day. But you start with this, guys. You start with the performance cam. Now, if you don't have the money to buy an real Engel 110, you can, or 100, you can get one of these from Brothers VW Machine Shop. It's a reground cam, and they performance grind it. So if you can see here how thin this edge is down the bottom, you look at this no good cam, you look how much more meat there is down there. If you can see that, they move this, they grind it off here and leave it up there. So they give you performance grind with that. Now these are about, they say it's a 100 or 110. It's really, I think, a C25 scat, which is different. If you look here, this is an Engel 100 cam next to a, what they call a 110, and you can see the lift is just not there. The duration is, though. The duration's really good on these, but the lift is just a lot less. So if you want to, you can get the real 100 cam, which is a little more money, or you can buy the Scat C20 or C25. So you kind of want to end up with about 400 lift, somewhere in there, maybe even up to 420, and in the 270s duration area, 265 to 270, somewhere in there. And you'll have a huge performance upgrade. So one of the ways to do that is to actually just use the Brothers Performance Cam if you want, the one that have the reground, and you can actually put the ratio rockers on it. It ends up costing you almost the same amount of money as buying the performance cam, so think of it that way. And I've done these with the German reground lifters to save some money, and it works great. And I've never had an issue with a cam going flat on me or anything like that from doing that. If you want to spend a little more money, you can buy the Scat lightweight lifters. I really like those with the little hole right in the little center, the Scat ones. Ippy makes a similar one. I was scared of those. We had an issue back years ago, and a bunch of those came back, just went flat within no time. They're MP cams and the cam and lifter set. So I'm scared to go back there again. I heard guys say that's fixed. I don't know. I'm not trusting that again. It wasn't anything I built, but some other guys, I saw some stuff, and yeah, it was bad. There was bunches of those came back. Now I heard it was the grinder, the relief grind on it or whatever, something like that on the cam that was causing the problem, not the actual cam blanks. Because a lot of, I know where they all come from, I'm not going to say, but they all come from the same place. Interesting. Even the CB ones. Mikey ain't saying squat. And the main thing is on the exhaust ports, so if you're going to use factory heads, there's a couple of different ones. There's some of the factory heads, the Mexican heads, the late models, they had small valves and smaller ports, and they weren't very good for performance, but they weren't that bad really if you went 1600. If you want to go bigger than that, no, those don't work good for that. So you got to kind of take a look at the heads. If you see these kind of ports like this, they're kind of small, and these are the Mexican heads. These are actually from a Mexican Beetle, I believe, late model, fuel injected. You might not see these, and these have 9mm. If you look at how much bigger those are, that 9mm exhaust valves, and they were sodium filled valves that they had in this year, in these later model ones. So these were not very good. They were smaller valves and not very good performance, but they probably would work okay on a 1600 because the flow of them is actually really good. The way that the exhaust port flows right here and goes around the corner. And if you see, it doesn't have bosses in it for the intake ports. I don't know if you can see that. Those are all things you look at when you're doing your heads. So these would work okay on a 1600, but for a bigger engine, no, that's not a good head for that. So, you know, if you're using old heads, those are all things to look at. And these are kind of cool because they have the peanut plug sides in them. So the Mexican Beetles, I believe they started that peanut plug thing over there. So anyway, that's the kind of thing you're looking at. You always look at your parts and figure out what you've got, and then go from there. So these heads, ooh, these are pretty dropped. This seat is really dropped in the, yeah, these are probably toast. So anyway, probably won't run those again. You have to take a look at your heads and see these ones here, Volkswagen stamped. Same, they have the bigger ports on these ones here, I believe. And then so we got, you know, this one's cracked, no good. So, you know, you got to really look over your heads and then feel in those ports. And if you're doing the single port, it's really easy to know. The single port's always going to have a really bad angle. When you go around the corner, you can't even get your pinky between the boss and the valve. You can't get your pinky in there. You can't. I mean, my pinky's kind of big, but you kind of put it, I can't get my pinky in there. So what I do is I just clean it up enough to where my pinky goes right through it. And man, what a huge improvement on the single port heads. Same thing with the dual port. Exhaust ports are usually where the issue is. Plus you can do something called D-port, the top. You can open these up, okay? Open these up quite a bit, and you'll have to open up your intake manifold to match them. So what I'll do is I'll open them up and I'll kind of come over here and make it into a D and make it up a little bit bigger. But you got to watch out for this right here. There's a little lump right there. And it's not on those other heads if you notice. But this little lump right here, you don't want to take too much of that off because that's the spring seat and it'll crack right there. So you got to be a little bit careful right around that little lump. Just don't take too much. You can take a little bit off of it, not too much. So on a 1600, all you do is just change the cam, because the cams were, to me, the factory cam was just terrible. They just didn't have any. They were made to go up to a maximum of about 4,000 RPMs, to make power up to about 4,000 RPMs, and that's it. And to get more power, you've got to have more RPMs. And it's just that simple. Get more air through the pump, and or better flow at the same time. So a cam will do both of those things. It'll give you better flow, and it'll give you, and so will the heads. So if you do the cam, a little bit of port work to the heads, clean them up, and increase, and to get that extra air and fuel to fire, you need a little more compression. So increase your compression ratio to about 8 1/4 to 1, and give it a cam, and port the heads a little bit. On a stock engine, it will come alive and it won't run hot because you've got more air and fuel in there. So when you got more air and fuel to fire, it's the proper amount for the combustion, and it ends up working really good. I've done this in bus engines and VW engines on cheap builds that I've done. over the years, and it really works good. Now, the next thing is, if you're gonna spend money, let's say you're getting out your wallet and you're buying a brand new, or getting your crank redone, you're getting rebuilt rods, you're getting, you know, new pistons and cylinders, you're getting the whole thing right. So you're getting new push rod tubes, you're doing a whole engine build. Listen, the best way, the easiest way to make power is to make the engine bigger. We've been doing it for years, doing this. I mean, back years ago, we only built 1776s and 1835s. That was just what everybody did. And it was because crankshafts were really, really, really expensive, and rods were the biggest thing. Today, there's so many more rod options that you have. You've got the AA rods, the AA I-beam rods. You've got CB Performance has some inexpensive rods, clearance rods, and there's just a whole bunch of options. And when you have all those options, you know, it makes it very affordable to go even bigger, to increase the stroke. So what we didn't do years ago is we didn't increase the stroke because that was too expensive. All we would do back in the day is open this up to 90.5 cylinders, which is still not expensive to do. Carcraft does this, very reasonable, guys. You can get a line bore Carcraft. You can get this done there on a regular 1600 case. They just don't do some of the, like, you know, cam bores on 40 horses and all that. They don't have the equipment to do that. That's where I go to Brothers Machine Shop for. But just to get my case opened up, maybe get a line bore, Carcraft does a great job. Also, there's a guy in Riverside, his name, Greg at Performance Workshop. He also does a great job. And if you wanted to have your engine built, you said, hey, guys are like, hey man, I don't want to build my own engine. I want to have somebody do it. That guy's very reasonable. He's been around for years. He's been around our network for years. I mean, I used to be in high school, or just out of high school, or it was in, like, I guess college age or whatever. And he used to come over to the shop and use our mill when theirs was down or something. I remember that. And his pops, Steve Timms, it was big time in the VW world, and he took it over now. And since his dad passed away, he's been doing it himself and doing an excellent job. So the first thing we used to do was open these up. And now some guys are back east or whatever, and you don't have access to a machine shop to do this, to open up your case. And, you know, honestly, it almost would be worth it if you're back east to start with a brand new case if you can afford it, because then you can just go straight to the aluminum, go to the bigger motor, and because by the time you ship your case out to here and have it line bored, which should be done just about every time you rebuild, you're supposed to line bore the case. You know, if there's any, you know, if you have a bore scope, which I know most of the guys don't, okay, then you should check your center main. And if your center main bearings are tight in the case and there's no ridge, you can run your fingernail over the middle, and there's no ridge in there, then maybe you can run it and be okay. But it's still, you're spending a lot of money. You really should have a brand new surface in there for your bearings and have that case inspected, make sure there's no cracks. If you're doing it yourself, you take a heat gun or carefully take a propane torch and just get it hot. Just be careful. Remember, this is magnesiums. It takes a lot of heat to get the magnesium to ignite. So if there's crumbs of magnesium around, that can be a problem. But heat up around this area, look and see when it gets hot, you'll see if there's a crack. A little bit of oil residue will come out of the crack, and it will start to be noticeable when you get it hot. But in this area here, this is where it's prone to cracking. In the later years, they had a case that I call blocked out number 3, where it had a big block of stuff in this area, all in this area here, and this area had a big block of, it wasn't welded in or anything. Some guys did that, but it wasn't welded in. It was actually just a casting block in that area, and that was probably one of the best cases ever made. I believe they made those in Mexico, some of them, but some of them, I have a German one, so it's pretty crazy, rare, never see those anymore. So again, the first thing to do, open the case up. Get more cylinder in there. And along with that, when you're buying your new crankshaft, you can make a choice. You go to 74 crank or 76 and get a brand new set of rods. These are brand new rods from AA Performance. Carcraft sells these too, and they have the best price on it. And so for the price of what it costs to buy rebuilt rods, you can buy a brand new set. I mean, it's within $50 of the price of buying rebuilt rods to get a brand new set of rods. Okay, so if you're going to replace your rod bushings, which you probably should do if you're doing a whole rebuild, okay, and getting your rods resized, which is basically a rebuilt rod, then you probably should get brand new rods. Get the brand new AA ones. Yeah, they're made in China, but they do work really well. We really haven't seen much as far as failures go unless somebody does something stupid with their engine. If you're just driving it like a normal person, they'll have an issue. So the best way to get more power is to get more inches out of your engine. And the most usable power is torque. So there's something called over square and under square of your engine. So the more, when you have an engine that's over square, that means it has a large cylinder, okay, and a shorter stroke. The stroke is shorter than the cylinder size. And then when you get, and that creates horsepower, top end horsepower. Now, if you want to get more torque, which is your drivable power, then you have more stroke. So you have, if you have an engine that has more stroke than it has bore, then what happens is you end up with more torque. So stroke, giving your engine more stroke is going to give you more torque. It's going to give you the power at the bottom. And it's the power that you use the most. And it's the power that when you're barely touching the gas, you have power, right? That's what you want if you want to get gas mileage too. So a lot of guys are like, hey man, you build a stroker engine, you're not going to get gas mileage. Yes, you can. I just told you the story of Bud. 36 miles. I remember it was 36 miles a gallon. That's what I remember. 34 maybe, 36. Unbeatable. I can't even get that in my 36 horsepower Beetle. Can't do it. I've tried, and no. Because I drive it too fast too, but maybe if I drove it 60, you know, I might get 32. I've only gotten like 25 to 28 miles a gallon. That's it. 36 horse. No power. 36 horse. No. They don't even do that well. That's being honest. That's checking it all. Mile to tank, everything. 25 miles a gallon. That's what I'm getting. And I can do that with a 1904 all day long, or I haven't tried it in the 2021, but I'm pretty sure I could do that too, especially if I had the thing geared up. The trick is stay fairly low on the compression, and all the parts are designed for that. So you've got to buy new heads, and I just showed you those old heads. A lot of them you're going to find out are junk, or they're the wrong kind, or they just don't work right. Like I said, the Mexican ones, those weren't very good heads, and the valve seats are dropped in them. You know, there's issues with those right now. So I look in the head pile, figure out what I've got, okay, and I figure out, you know, I'm going to have to buy new heads anyway. Here's the new set of heads. I'll show you. And look at how much larger the combustion chamber is on these. These are 60 cc out of the hole. These are the OE that Carcraft sells, and they're 60 cc. So what that's telling me is it's begging me. It's begging me to go with a bigger engine, okay? These heads are going, please make me big. They do have stock valve size, okay? They do not have the peanut plug. They have two different ones over there. They have ones with peanut plug too if you wanted to do that. They also have the ones to 40-35 valves if you really want to go fast. But if you look here, the ports on these are actually really nicely flowing. I mean, they flow really smooth. They could be cleaned up a little bit. The exhaust port looks kind of small, but it flows really good to the valve. So I can put my finger in there, and it doesn't have valve guide bosses in it. These are going to flow a lot better than the old heads that I have laying around. So this engine's going to love to run. The other thing you look at is go down the air ports. The castings look pretty good. They're pretty well opened. Maybe I'll get a file out and clean up a couple of them there. You can see that little area there. Those are types of things you look at when you buy new heads. Go through, get a file in there and kind of clean that up. But out of the box, these are probably just fine the way they are. Maybe I could just run them. I've seen old VW heads that had worse casting than that. So that's kind of how I look at it. If I'm gonna have to buy new heads, okay, I'm definitely gonna go bigger with the engine. And a lot of times you run into limitations because let's say you run your CCs on some old heads that you have and they're 48 cc. Well, if you go really big with the engine, then what's going to happen is it's going to be really high compression. So I don't want to have a really high compression engine up to like 9-to-1, or I mean 9-to-1's okay, but I kind of know that if it's at 9-to-1, then I'm going to baby it, you know, and stuff like that. When I go uphill, I'm not going to push it real hard. I'm going to let it go up to the top of the hill. Usually it will work fine, but you got to know the things about the car and just be like, okay, I'm not going to push it, and let it go up the hill easier, which is good anyway. Even if you have a lower compression engine, it doesn't hurt to do that. So again, these are the types of things when I'm assessing my engine build, like I look at my parts and I figure out, okay, am I just gonna have to squeeze out and buy new heads? Okay, in this case, I went with the cheaper heads because we're only putting a smaller carburetor on it. So I'm not going for like real high performance. So we're going for like a lot of torque, which will give you that low end drivability power. So you can do these things however you want. You know, you can build it big because you want to go really fast and just put big carburetors on it and max it out. Or you can build it big just to get the torque. And as long as you have enough air and fuel in there, you know, you don't want to, this is things that you can do wrong. Okay. I've seen guys build 2007s with, you know, that much fire inside the barrel, you know what I mean? Okay, because they've got small combustion chamber heads, okay, in single port, so there's not enough air and fuel going in there, so that you got to really have low compression to do that, okay? So, and they put a performance cam in it that does nothing for them because there's not enough compression for that thing to fire. So, you know, you got to get it kind of in the ballpark of being right, you know, like a little with a bigger performance cam, a bigger engine, okay, you need a little more compression to be able to fire. So 8 1/4, 8 1/2 is usually a safe place to be. Some guys are going up to 8 1/2 on these. We're talking about reliable engine builds. I'm not talking about performance. If you want to go fast, more compression is going to do it. It's going to give you more, but you're also going to have closer to detonation. And you're probably going to have to run, maybe you'll have to even run race fuel if you go over 10-to-1. You know, there's a whole bunch of things in there. And then you can have a hot running engine. If you're not trying to do that, I'm talking about reliability, street performance, then you stay within those means. That's what a lot of these engine builders, like I think Powerhouse builds an 8 1/2-to-1. One of those guys, I don't really know who they are, but I've just watched a video from them. So again, what's going to determine what size I'm going to go is the heads that I have. If I have 55 cc heads, then I know that I can't go too large. I'm going to have to stay, keep in that 8 1/4 zone. I'm going to have to stay with a little bit smaller engine. Maybe I'll only do a 1904. Okay. If I've got 60 cc heads, then I can go up to the bigger size. You know, I can go up to the 2021, and I'm still going to have an 8 1/4-to-1 compression ratio with a decent low 60 thousandths deck. Now, if you're not sure, the best way to check is to go on CB Performance has something called an engine calculator, and you put in your deck height, you put in your size, and you come up with estimated, so you can kind of go, okay, well, if the heads I have are 50 cc, 60 cc, then what size, you know, if I put it up to this size, what's the compression ratio going to be at 60 deck? I don't like to go more than 60 deck. You know, I will not go to 70 or 80, just won't do it. I'll do whatever I've got to do to my heads, either step cut them to get them lower compression, or I will get my grinder out. And this isn't a bad idea to do anyway, is take this edge right here and soften it. a little bit, soften that. That'll give me a couple more cc just by doing that. Take that edge off, clean it up, soften it up a little bit so that the fire wants to go to the spark plug. The compression, when it goes in, it wants to push itself right to the spark plug and to the valve. That's what we want it to do. And if you really just want to use some old heads you have for whatever reason, you can take them in and have them hemi cut. But I'm going to tell you, you're going to spend a lot more money doing that than you will just buying a brand new set of heads. But Mike, the new ones aren't as good as the old ones. Oh yeah? Okay, whatever. I've seen some of these heads they make now. The airports on them are so much better than the old ones. The castings, they were just blowing them out. You know, VW was they were mass producing cars, and they didn't really care if they just wanted to make, they were way underpowering them, and they just wanted to make them as quick as they can, so they really didn't care on the heads. Those exhaust ports, you put your finger in, there's a hard corner in there. You'll know what I'm talking about when you look at them. So again, guys, I know a lot of guys are like, oh, I want to build a 1776. You know, listen, a 1904, a 1968, or a 76 stroke. What is that one? The smaller one? I can't remember. I can't remember the number. But then there's a 2021 if you really want to go big, and get a lot more torque for your money. It's going to cost you about the same amount of money as it does to go with with all new parts for 1776. You know, if you build a counterweighted 1776, it's within $100 of the same money, and you get a lot more torque. It's the friendliest horsepower you can ever get is the bottom end. And you know, the things you're going to have to do, another thing you're going to have to do, I'm going to tell you this because a lot of guys are going to be like, oh, I built one and it leaks oil. Anything larger than a 17, or I think 1776 is the threshold of pain. Anything larger than that, you need to upgrade your breather system. On this engine, I'm going with one of these. Maybe you don't want the look of this, okay? But this one is going to be like a Baja Bug. So it's not an original car at all or anything. So I'm putting one of these on here. These work the best. CB makes one of these, are really nice. CB ones are a little nicer than the MP ones, a little more expensive. The Carcraft has a good price on these, but they don't stock them, so you're gonna have to order it and wait a couple weeks, guys. Couple, 3 weeks to get it. So sometimes it's a couple days, sometimes a couple weeks, depends on if they're back ordered, who knows. This one actually took a little while to get in. The other option is you put the breather box behind the fan shroud and you run your tubes up behind. You can make it so you almost don't see it. And then, I mean, even if you have a 1776 and you're running a high RPMs on the freeway, you're probably going to blow oil big time. You'll know because it comes out of here. That's where it usually comes out. And that's why I like to not run a sand seal, because if it's blowing out of here, it's talking to me. Okay, if I got a sand seal there, it might not, and it'll just blow out of everywhere. And no, this engine's not going off-road. If it was going off-road, it'd have to be sand sealed for sure. So if you're running, if you want to make your engine look stock, you definitely need the one with the road draft tube. I found if you don't run the one with the road draft tube and you have a bigger engine, then what will happen is it'll blow oil. So if you have the road draft tube, which is this long tube right here, set up, and then you have this one, say, going to your carburetor, that helps give you the extra ventilation you need, in addition to the valve covers having vents in them and having hoses going from the valve covers up to a breather box behind the engine if you want it to be hidden. Well, again, this engine, I'm not hiding it. I'm just going to put it right in the front, and it changes it'll be good for this car because it'll have the oil filler in the back. It's kind of like a bus. You guys will see it later. So that's the one last thing I wanted to say. But if honestly, if you're gonna do it and you're gonna spend, $3,000 or something like that, it's just not worth it to not spend another 100 or 2 to go with a larger stroke. It's really not that hard to do. There's very little machine work that you can do yourself. I'm not talking about when you go larger stroke. All I did, you look down inside here, see that little notch right there? That's where the rod bolt hits, and that's all I had to do to go to 76. It's really not that hard to do. But you should always put it together, rotate it, and check it again. Double check it, because sometimes there's a little weird casting on the case somewhere, and you got to clean that up a little bit. But usually it's just there's like 4 area on each side. 1, 2, 3, 4. In fact, I think it's only on the bottom or only on the top, I can't remember, but only one area that gets really very close. And especially when you go with the larger opening here. If you're using this 69 or 60 or 85 and a half opening here, you're probably gonna have to do a little bit more to here, because you got your surface is bigger on this one. It's a little bit bigger. It's not that much, but it is just a little bit bigger. So, and then on your 85 and a half pistons, or if you're going to go with 88 thick walls, you do have to trim the piston skirts. So, and it's not hard to do. You just get a scale. I marked them on the 74 was 200 thousandths. We took off the bottom of the piston, just straight across, sort of straight line, and cut them off. It wasn't even hard. It might be different on yours. Okay, so you might cut 200 off, and you might like, oh, I need a little more. Okay, then just take another 100 off, 100 thousandths. You just use your micrometer and you just scribe across it. That's it. And you get a nice straight line, and then put them on the scale. Make sure you got them all the same weight. Usually it's fine. Usually you're right on the money. So anyway, so consider that, guys. If you're going to go spend the money, if you're getting your wallet out, do the right thing, spend a little more money, get the stroke you want, get the extra stroke. Porsche did it, 74 stroke Porsche, used almost the same case as a VW. Okay, and in fact, they did use the same case in the 36 horse, and it was 74 stroke. Okay, so if they put a 74 in a 36, you can put a 74 in a regular engine, or even a 76 in in a 1600 case, and you'll be fine. There's no reason. It's when you start going bigger than that to like a 78.4, it fits in the case too. There's a little bit of work to be done, same thing. But then you're getting to a point where you're starting to get a lot of reciprocating weight, and it's up to you. If you want to do that one, and it might work just fine, it depends on how you drive. You could probably get away with that too, but 82s and stuff like that, that's when you got to cut the case a lot. Okay, then you got to take it in, have it machined. Then I say, just go with the aluminum case at that point, and then you'll have a really good long-lasting engine, because the whole case is shuffle pinned together. It's just stronger, better material. They work really good. So I'll have another video on that. Anyway, I'll talk to you in the next video. Please like, share, and subscribe, and hope this helps.